Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's take a look at this big red book right here. This is the Hellsing Deluxe Edition by Kota Hirano. This is put out by Dark Horse Manga. I got a deal on it, so I bought it. I actually haven't read the manga in quite a number of years, but I have a lot of nostalgia for it, so I figured it was a good opportunity to go ahead and pick this up. One of the reasons I bought this is if you have paid attention on the channel, I talked about this. This is the Berserk Deluxe Edition, and I really liked this presentation. I really liked this product. So why not buy something in Hellsing, basically with the same quality? And you are getting roughly the same quality for both of these, but I'll review a couple of things that I think are specific to Hellsing that aren't as apparent with Berserk. So first of all, if we look at the covers, we have this nice shiny red on black, and we have shiny black on red with an embossed cross versus the brand. I think I like the Berserk volume a little bit better. This textured faux leather just feels a little bit better. This looks more like, it's still like a leather texture, but it's a little smoother. It just looks a little bit more faux, I guess, than this one does. But it is really nice, and I do like the binding a lot. The binding's the same quality as Berserk. All the pages are bound in a book binding that's really, really good quality. The gutters are not set up so that you're losing any art in the gutters. So in general, it's a great binding to look at. We can look at a couple of things inside as well, because I just want to point out a few things that have to do with this one. So first of all, we have a black splash page, and this is a time to point out that because we are printing on flat paper, not that shiny magazine paper, you are not going to get a true black. It's going to be more of a gray. This doesn't matter all of that much, though, because we're looking only in black and white. We're automatically, in our brain, basically going to shift the blacks to black and know that all of this is black, even though it's technically gray, because you can't get that ink to be perfectly opaque on this flat paper. The paper is nice and thick. It's not thin at all. It's not thin magazine paper. It's going to stand up to a lot of reading, a lot of wear, and I believe that this bright white paper will hold its color a lot better than the older tankobons. Now, I don't have any of these in the tankobon, but just to compare, here's a Berserk one that I grabbed off the shelf, and you can see just how much more yellow the pages are, as well as having the smaller art. So it's a much bigger presentation, and it's also going to have much better contrast because of the lack of yellowing and the brightness of the paper. And that really helps the fact that the blacks can't really be truly black. They look blacker on this because of the higher contrast in general. And you're also able to get a lot more detail on this. So I also want to talk about a couple of things with the printing. One of the things that I noticed with this manga as opposed to, say, Berserk, is that there's a lot more use of screen tones. So there's a lot heavier use of screen tones throughout to use them for shading and things like that. Whereas Kentaro Miura tends to use a lot of hatching in a classical sense. There's nothing wrong with using screen tone, but you notice the screen tone more in the bigger format. And one of the things you may notice is that there's like little patterns to some of the screen tones, like on his jacket here. And not just the dots. So a screen tone is basically a series of dots that your eye interprets as gray in this case, because you actually can't print, there's no gray ink. You print in black and white, and you create the illusion of gray by creating a bunch of little dots that show up as gray. So this is a screen tone process, and I don't know if it's from the printing or not, but you get a lot of weird little artifacts where there's some patterning within the grays that shows up really throughout a lot of these things. And in other cases, you can see the original Zipatone sheets and screen tones that were used to create the original shading. Like this one is lines, and you used to be able to get them in sheets, and you'd put them in to create the color. This one is also lines over here. So this is the original Zipatone sheet, the original screen tone sheet that's used to create the gray from the original manga. And it actually looks pretty good here. You can see the little dots pretty well. And so when it sizes up, you're able to perceive that more. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just in some places you notice an odd little checkerboard pattern that I think might be an artifact of the printing process in general rather than the screen tone sheets that were used to originally color the images. So we can see one actually pretty clearly here if we get a magnifying glass and get it nice and big. So you can see maybe a little bit of a checkerboard pattern. And I assume this was done through some digital process, and that might be an artifact of the digital printing process. Oh, you can see a classic like Zipatone sheet in the back here. See those big dots. So you used to be able to get those sheets and you'd put them on there to create the background, and that's how you did a lot of coloring because you could only actually print in black and white. So those things are more noticeable, but otherwise the blacks are nice and sharp. The edges are extremely well defined. I can't see any problems with resolution anywhere other than those very slight artifacts with the screen tone, and that's probably going to happen because that's the nature of the beast, I think, a little bit when you're dealing with lots of little dots and lots of grays. So there's a lot more use of grays in this manga versus, say, Berserk. So anyway, in general, the printing is really, really good. There's a couple things I want to address because this is a resetting of the original translations and stuff, and I just want to point out a couple editorial things. So original translation, or this translation by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think it's just a guy named Dwayne Johnson. And some lettering, Studio Cutie and Wilbert Lacuna. Let's talk about some choices that I think are suboptimal. So the first one is the use of papyrus font. So if you guys don't know anything about papyrus font, it's a very overused font. It was used for the headlines for Avatar. But back in the mid-aughts, this font was everywhere, and I was part of the problem. I used it as a headline font on all kinds of posters and stuff because it was a system font. I could quickly make a poster on someone else's Mac if I needed to make one really quick, and just kind of work up something for a promotion. And I would use this a lot because it looked kind of classic, it looked kind of weathered, and it just wasn't Times New Roman or one of these other system standard serif fonts. It's really not a good font for lettering a comic, though. In my opinion, it's a pretty poor font. You should really only use it for headlines, and if you're going to use it for headlines, it's really overused. So you probably would just want to make a different font choice in general. But for something like this, where it's just lettering, for all of the narrative stuff that is non-dialogue. So this is narrative. These are narrative boxes that go with the pictures, like a narrator would. He could clearly see that the vicar had blood trickling from his mouth. Papyrus is not a good choice. And the reason it's not a good choice is you get lots of kerning issues because it's a hand-drawn font. It's very asymmetrical. So you end up with issues like this word sleepy here, where everything just kind of runs together. And the word sleepy, the L's, the E's, and the P's kind of get stuck together, the I and the L. And then there's sometimes big gulfs between stuff if things are spaced a little bit wide. So I'm assuming they set the spacing pretty tight to try to get rid of that, but it makes it less readable. So in general, that's a poor choice of font. I think they maybe picked it. This might be from the original manga. I'd have to go look. So if you know, let me know, because I didn't bother to look before this video. It might have been in the original translations that they chose this because it was translated like in the early aughts, if I remember right. It's been a long time since I've read this stuff. So that was a really popular choice back then, and it kind of fits the overall aesthetic and tone, I guess, of the manga in general. So that's probably why they picked it. Another little editorial thing is there's some characters that speak with an accent, and they write their dialogue down in very, very what I would call heavy phonetics. Let's call it just heavy use of phonetics. So rather than writing down the words the person is saying, they're trying to write them down in a phonetic version of what they're saying with their accent. So there's a character that has an Irish accent. You can get a look at lots of the art here as we go through it. And his Irish accent is, as we can see here, Our mission is tie, destroy, doon, tie, the last wee bit, thy fools wha would oppose our God, right? That's too much. You just want to give a hint of someone's accent if you're going to do this. So you might just say our instead of our to give a hint that this guy's maybe talking with a Scottish or an Irish accent. Otherwise, you just need to write the words as much as possible. Because what happens is you run into this character and you end up pausing in your tracks and wondering what he's meaning and what he's saying because he has his dialogue is so hard to read. And there's several characters that are like this. The on its lane would not be enough to kill your kind though. It'd be like that on its lane would not be enough to. You're like, what is he saying? Why can't you just write it with the regular words, and then you can imagine it in an Irish accent. And the fact is, they just wrote it in regular English words. I could probably just do an Irish accent and it would sound the way it's supposed to sound, either in my head or just out loud here. Because no ayin a thigh went through your heart. Because no ayin a thigh went through your heart. It's been a long time since I went vampire hunting. Got to have some fun. Got to have some fun, right? He's like dropping V's and stuff. It's too much. So bad editorial decision, in my opinion, to go overboard with the phonetic pronunciations. And if you're writing a novel, that's also a good piece of advice for you in general. Avoid the regional dialects and the patois. Just use it sparingly. Just give a hint. You give a hint of what the person says, or say that they speak in a Yankee accent or something else, or they speak in an Irish accent, or they have a heavy lilt. And just give a hint of what it really is supposed to sound like, rather than making me do Pikey Come Again every single time I'm trying to read one of his Ye Hellsing Mongrels, right? I'd rather just imagine it as it would sound to like an Irishman or a Scotsman saying it, versus having to try to interpret phonetics and be like, wait, what word is he saying? Because this is a written visual format, not an auditory format. You really want to avoid doing those heavy accents. It stops the reader in its tracks. Where I'm reading everything at a nice pace, and then I come here and I'm like, what is he saying? I have to stop and think about what he's saying rather than kind of going through the story at a normal pace. So there's that. I'm not going to do an analysis of the manga itself. That's really would be more appropriate for another video. But in general, pretty high quality printing. You can see the details here. And in some cases, you can really read like the details that are very small, written over here that just would get lost in just a smaller format. And that's really nice. You can read the stuff, speak with the dead, like on the gloves. You can read the writing on the guns and get something from what's written on the guns. That's really, really cool stuff. And in general, like I said, the gutters, you're not really losing art in the gutters, which is great. There's not a lot of two-page spread kind of stuff in this anyway, but I really appreciated that they were mindful of how the gutters were going to work, and we're not really losing too much of the art in the gutter other than what would have been originally there anyway. So thanks so much, guys. Let me know what you think down below if you like Hellsing, and maybe we'll do like some story analysis or art analysis of it later on. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time. If you're thinking of buying it, this is the only volume that's out now. The other ones are on pre-order, but now you have some more information to decide if that's the kind of product you want to buy. Last thing I'll say is about value. And the truth is that these bigger bindings are actually a pretty good value if you were going to buy 3 of the smaller ones anyway, the tankobons. So if you were going to buy 3 of these, they're like $12 to $15 each. I thought this for like $28, and I bought this for like $31, $32. So I got a little bit of a deal on it, but it's cheaper than buying 3 of these. Even if you're buying these at a little bit of a discount, 12 times 3, you're at 36, and this is cheaper, and it's a better presentation. It's bigger. It's not going to yellow. You can see the art better. The binding is more robust. It sits on your shelf longer, better. It's just a better product in every single sense, other than you don't have maybe the covers, but the covers are all towards the end. So if you want to see the covers, they usually put them in at the end, so you can see more of what the covers were really supposed to look like. At least they did it with Berserk. I'm actually not sure if they did it with this one. I don't think they did. Okay, so never mind with that. They did it with Berserk. They put the covers in the end. But so rather than buying this, you could buy a nice bigger format one and actually save a little bit of money. So there you go. And even if you bought this at full price, $50, that's $5 more than buying 3 tankobons at full price, and it's bigger, better in every way. So if you want to pay a little bit extra, even if you're paying full retail price, you're going to get a much better product as a result of that. So really the value is not bad. And then that's the last thing I'll say about that. I'll see you guys next time.